Welcome to Fun Facts Daily, your source for just the good stuff. Monday through Friday, we're bringing fun facts and news you can use, all carefully curated to uplift and inform. So give yourself a break, relax, and learn something awesome in just a few minutes every day. Hi everyone, I'm Kyle Wood, and today we're going to be learning about the incredible Palace of Versailles, the crown jewel of French history and architecture. But before we get into the facts, let's warm up our brains with a little challenge to see if you can tell fact from fiction. Consider this. The Palace of Versailles is one of the ultimate symbols of royal luxury and indulgence. From the looks of things, it appears no expense was spared and it was filled with nothing but the best. But would you believe that while they spent so much time and money on the mirrors, fountains, and gardens, they neglected some pretty critical functional elements, specifically the bathrooms? Rumor has it the Palace of Versailles looked awesome but smelled awful because the lack of bathrooms left people doing their business in any corner or corridor they could find. What do you think? Was Louis XIV's dream palace really a sanitation nightmare? We'll find out at the end of the episode. Now for your word of the day. Our word for today is etiquette. That's etiquette. In modern English, etiquette refers to the customary code of polite behavior in society among members of a particular group. While we use it today to describe generally nice things like using the right fork at dinner or saying please and thank you, the word actually comes from a very specific origin in the gardens of Versailles. Our word etiquette comes from the French word etiquette, which originally meant label or a ticket. During the reign of King Louis XIV, the royal head gardener was constantly frustrated because the noble courtiers would trample over his carefully manicured gardens. To solve the problem, he put up small signs or etiquettes to warn people to stay on the paths and keep off the grass. Eventually, these tickets evolved into the list of rules for how to behave in the presence of the king, and then, just more broadly, how to behave in polite society. Time for your daily high five, our top 5 fun facts about the Palace of Versailles. Number 1. The palace's famous Hall of Mirrors was created through an act of industrial espionage. In the 1600s, the Republic of Venice held a strict monopoly on the secret technology required to make high-quality mirrors, and it was actually illegal for mirror makers to leave the city. Since Louis XIV wanted his palace to be purely French-made, his ministers reportedly smuggled several Venetian craftsmen into France to teach them the trade. This was a dangerous mission. Venice was known to send agents to track down and punish those who shared their glass-making secrets. The resulting Hall of Mirrors contains 357 mirrors, which was an unthinkable display of wealth at the time because mirrors were among the most expensive items a person could own. The hall was designed so that the mirrors would reflect the light from the massive windows overlooking the gardens, making the room glow even on cloudy days. It wasn't just a hallway, it was kind of a political statement to the world that France had surpassed Venice in luxury and technology. Number 2. Before it became the center of French power, the palace at Versailles was originally just a humble hunting lodge. In 1623, Louis XIII built a small red brick hunting retreat in Versailles. When his son Louis XIV took the throne, he decided to move the entire royal court away from the busy streets of Paris to this rural location. Over several decades, he transformed that simple lodge into a palace that could house up to 10,000 people at once. The expansion was so massive. At one point, they had over 30,000 workers on site every single day just to keep the construction moving forward. The king was so obsessed with the project, he spent about 25% of France's total government income on the palace's construction and maintenance. Today, the palace grounds cover about 2,000 acres, which is more than double the size of Central Park in New York City. Number 3. The king's daily routines were a public performance for hundreds of onlookers and participants. Living at Versailles meant having almost zero privacy, especially for the king, because his entire day was governed by strict ceremonies. The most famous of these were the lever and the coucher, which were the formal ceremonies for the king waking up and going to bed. Every morning, about 100 courtiers would gather in the king's bedroom just to watch him get out of bed, wash his face, and put on his shoes. Being allowed to hold the king's candle or help him put on his right sleeve was considered the highest honor a nobleman could receive. Louis XIV used these elaborate rituals to keep the powerful nobles busy and competing for his favor so they wouldn't have time to plot any rebellions against him. Even the king's meals were often a public event, with people standing in line just to watch him eat a piece of chicken or sip on some wine. Number 4. The gardens in the Palace of Versailles are well known for their fountains, but apparently they didn't have enough water for all those fountains. The gardens of Versailles have about 1,400 fountains, but the palace was built on a site that didn't have a natural water source large enough to power all of them. Engineers did what they could. They built a massive machine called the Machine de Marly to pump water from the Seine River, but it still wasn't enough. There was so little water pressure that the gardeners had to use a secret system of whistles to communicate with one another. Whenever the king went for a walk, the fountain mounters would watch him closely from a distance and whistle to the next worker to turn the valves on just as the king approached. Once he walked past a fountain, they would quickly turn it off and rush to the next one to save water. It's kind of a clever trick, but also just a lot of work to make sure that the king always saw the fountain spraying at full power without him ever realizing the reservoir was actually running low. And our fifth and final fun fact for today. Before the French Revolution, the palace was filled with massive pieces of furniture made entirely out of pure, solid silver. We often think of royal furniture being made of, nicely carved wood, maybe some delicate gold leaf embellishments, but Louis XIV took things to a whole new level. He commissioned over 2,500 pieces of furniture, tables, benches, torch holders, even a massive throne, all made of solid silver. In total, historians estimate this collection was about 20 tons of pure silver. If you were to calculate the value of just the raw silver in today's market, it would be about $25 million worth. And that doesn't even begin to account for the priceless craftsmanship involved. These pieces were incredibly heavy, but they were also quite striking. They would shimmer and reflect the light in the Hall of Mirrors, leaving visiting ambassadors completely speechless. Unfortunately, if you visit Versailles today, you won't see this silver furniture because almost every bit of it had to be melted down in 1689. The king had entered into several expensive wars and ran out of money to pay his soldiers, so he made the difficult choice to turn his beautiful furniture back into coins. It took about 6 months of constant work for the royal mint to melt everything down, and the loss to the art world was considered absolutely devastating. But even the king had to make sacrifices to pay the bills. Now for some news you can use. If you're visiting the Palace of Versailles, start your day in the gardens instead of the palace. Most tourists arrive and immediately stand in the massive line for the Hall of Mirrors, but the gardens are often most beautiful and peaceful right when the gates open in the morning. By exploring the gardens and the Trianon estate first, you can enjoy the fountains and statues without the crowds, and then head into the main palace in the late afternoon when the morning rush has died down a bit. It's also a great idea to check the schedule for the musical fountain show. On certain days, the palace plays Baroque music through hidden speakers throughout the gardens while the fountains are fully operational. This will allow you to experience the grounds exactly as Louis XIV intended, with the sight of dancing water and the sound of a full orchestra. Just remember to wear some comfortable shoes because you'll probably be walking for several miles before you know it. Finally, the moment you've been waiting for. At the beginning of the episode, I asked, could it possibly be true that the Palace of Versailles was visually stunning and absolutely beautiful, but an olfactory nightmare because of a lack of plumbing and sanitation? Well, that's a fact. While there weren't zero toilets, it was still very messy. When the palace was built, indoor plumbing as we know it didn't exist, and there weren't enough facilities for the thousands of people living there. The king and his family had close stools, which were essentially portable toilets that servants would empty, and a few lucky nobles had small, quote, closets for similar purposes. But for the majority of the courtiers and visitors, finding a place to go was a major struggle, and people often just resorted to using corners or going in the hallway. It wasn't until the 18th century that more permanent latrines were installed, but for a long time, the smells of Versailles were nowhere near as appealing as the visuals. Now, I hope you enjoyed learning a bit about the Palace of Versailles with me today. Be sure to tune in every weekday for even more fun facts. Fun Facts Daily is an Airwave Media podcast. It was written, recorded, mixed, and edited by me, Kyle Wood. Thanks for sharing a part of your day with me. Be sure to follow Fun Facts Daily on your favorite podcast app so you can keep the good stuff coming your way every day. And if you like the show, please do me a favor and leave a kind rating, review, or just tell your friends about it.